Hi there, my name is Bradley Look, and I'm a professional makeup artist of 30 years, local 706 union makeup journeyman, and I am here to talk about my career. I worked on Star Trek Voyager, Star Trek Enterprise, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I worked on all the Star Trek shows as well as the features. So when I was doing makeups for any of those television shows, I kept the makeup simple and repeatable. That was the main thing. You have to be able to repeat that makeup. Even if it's a complex makeup, I would make notes to myself so I would keep it always looking the same. A lot of times people will go in and they won't write notes down, they won't, I'm a stickler for that, to make sure that that makeup always looks consistent. For instance, Hoshi on Star Trek Enterprise, I had her makeup down. I mixed her base. Her base was a combination of Shinto 1 and Shinto 2. And I got like a Shinto and a half. So I would take her makeup, melt it down, and pour it up, and I had always her base. I did the same thing for John Billingsley, who played Phlox. So I always had the makeup regimented so it could always be consistent. And I did that for any of my guest stars. I would figure out their makeup, and I would do the same thing for my stars. In fact, Sonny Berman came to me. He says, Brad, he goes, I have a problem. He goes, I do, Worf's makeup on Deep Space Nine. And he says, the makeup just does not match close enough to the packs. Can you help me? I said, sure. What I can do is, if you want the base that you're putting on him, which is an RCMA base, if you want that base to look more like the PAX color, I will come up with a formula for the PAX color. And so he gave me the two, and I reformulated the PAX so it matched dead on to that of the RCMA base that he was putting on the rest of his face. So it made it easier for Sonny to do this makeup and not have to stress out about the fact that it was off or something was wrong. I just created a whole new PAX color based upon what he needed, what his wishes were. And I did that a lot of times on Star Trek. We'd have guest stars coming in, and I would actually figure out PAX colors by formulating them. I'd weigh everything out, and everything was regimented. So I could recreate that makeup all the time to look the same. Digital changed everything, because when I was working on Star Trek, we were shooting on film. And as soon as we switched to digital, everything started changing. In fact, I went up with Michael Westmore, and I went up to Rick Berman's office, because Michael says, I want you to be right there with me, Brad, because we're going to be looking at the new dailies. Everything is digital, and I want you to be there to see everything. So we went up there, and I'm sitting right next to one of our producers. And Rick Berman's sitting there next to Michael and me, and so we're sitting there looking at the dailies. And the producer nudges me and says, my God, I can actually make out all the little sayings that we have on the set, because all the sets have these little placards on them that have a code and number, and basically it's to make it look like if there's a panel that needs to be removed, you give that code and you know what goes to that panel. So he goes, I can actually read out everything it says on that panel. And that was a big telling sign, because at that point, it meant that you had to be very good and clean with your makeups. You can't have anything that doesn't look clean. I wrote a book called Star Trek Aliens and Artifacts, and I did a lot of research for that. One of the things I found out was that Frank Westmore, because I worked with the Westmores a lot, as you'll find out, Frank Westmore was integral in getting color television makeup put together, because at that point all they had was for features, and it was either black and white, which would be panchromatic makeup, or color, which would be Technicolor. Well, when you're going into now basically video, which is what some of the early shows were, they were shot on film, but then they were transferred to video. They had to come up with a whole system of coloring makeup for just regular makeup. So Frank Westmore came in, and he worked over at Paramount, and they shot Ponderosa, which was Bonanza, which was the big color show. Everything was based upon the fact that this show was going to be so big and so popular that they could sell a lot of color TVs. So everything was riding on the fact that Bonanza would be a very big success. So Frank Westmore came in and he designed the color makeups. He spent weeks working on that, testing it, see what colors read and what ones didn't, how they looked, if they looked too saturated or they did look too flat or gray. And so he came up with this whole color process that early television for color was based upon. For Dick Smith, he was designing makeups because he was the head of makeup at NBC. Most people don't know it. Everyone thinks of him as the Exorcist makeup and all the other makeups that he's very well known for. He did a lot of just straight beauty makeup and corrective makeup. He was there at the same time that Lee Bagan was there, who I also met and talked to. And he was telling me all the different things that they were doing at NBC at the time. And again, these are all early times and there was no guide to how to do that. They had to figure it out. And so that was a time of great learning and experimentation. And I'm sure for those who were working on it, it was probably an exciting time because you didn't have any limits. You were trying to find the limits. Or if there was limitless, how far you could take things. Like blood. I mean, blood, how it photographs on film is different than how it photographs on video, is how it photographs differently for black and white. So all of those are elements that change how you as a makeup artist work because you have to base it on what works for the medium that you're shooting it for. Just remember, everyone is human. Everyone eats, everyone puts on clothes, everyone combs their hair. Don't think of them as this demigod. Just think of them as human. I said, and approach them as human. And I have said that numerous times when I'm working with actors. Even if it's an actor who I think is really cool, I try to kind of hold that back and just keep approaching them as a person. And it's the one thing I've learned that really makes the difference is do not approach them like a fan. Approach them as a person. And when you approach them like a person and it's like, okay, this is Dick Smith, or this is, Dick Van Dyke, because I worked with Dick Van Dyke. I worked with Hal Holbrook. It's like, hi Hal, what do you need? And we just have this give and take. And that's the best thing I can say for any student. What is the best thing to do? Is take the fan thing and leave it at the door and just be as professional as you can and approach every person as a professional. And that makes a huge difference. If you come across as this fan who is just giddy and everything, it's like you're not gonna win over an actor. You have to approach them as just a person.